In the last few decades, meditation has become all anyone can talk about. It's been touted to improve your immunity, to reduce your stress, to increase your happiness, and provide generally overall improved quality of life. It even helps with things like digestive issues. And the question that a lot of people are curious about and confused about is, why does meditation work for so many different things, and why is it so effective? How does just sitting in one spot and focusing on your breath improve your digestion? How does it boost your immunity? In this video, we're going to be covering exactly why meditation does exactly what it does in terms of the changes in the brain that come about that allow for all these benefits to happen. And we're also going to go over the behavioral changes that come about due to meditation that help us, have all of these great benefits like lowered stress, increased happiness, better digestion, etc., etc. So in the first part of this video, let's go ahead and dive into kind of the biology of meditation and why exactly it's able to provide all these benefits that it does. The main thing that meditation is really good at doing, and where a lot of its benefits come from, has to do with two parts of the brain: the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So before we understand how meditation influences these two brain regions, along with many others, but these are the two we're going to focus on, we need to first understand kind of how does the prefrontal cortex work and how does the amygdala work. So the prefrontal cortex is our rational, logical thinking part of the brain that kind of separates us from other animals. It's where we'll kind of reason through things, where we'll think about stuff. It's a very big area for logic and reason. And then the amygdala is a more primal part of our brain that focuses on our kind of fear response and emotional response. So your fight or flight response can be largely governed by your amygdala. So when you feel scared or you feel really overwhelmed, that is your amygdala at play. And so what happens in meditation is that if you look at non-meditators, right? Let's say a stressful situation happens to you. Let's say you fail a test, or you get fired from your job, something like that. These are difficult things to deal with, and they should cause some emotional distress. But what happens for a lot of people is they'll have that amygdala, kind of fire up. They'll get really sad, they'll get really fearful, they'll get super overwhelmed. That amygdala will kind of take over, and they'll have an extreme emotional reaction that'll actually get in the way of them, responding to whatever situation they have, and that'll be disproportionate to what actually happened. And this is more noticeable on smaller scales. So if you're, stuck in rush hour traffic, the amount of rage that you'll feel is really disproportional to the situation that's happening. Being stuck in traffic is not a life or death situation, but your brain will kind of make you feel like it is. Your amygdala will be super overreactive. You'll get really emotional, really angry, really upset. And this is where, with meditators, something really interesting happens. So in meditation, what you kind of do is you practice focusing on your breath. So no matter what thoughts come up, what emotions come up, you might get distracted, but you want to come back to your breath. And you train your brain to kind of come back from whatever it is you're doing to the present moment. And what this does is, in real life, when we have this huge emotional response, we're stuck in traffic, we're stuck in line, something really small that just causes us a lot of anger for some reason, our prefrontal cortex kind of steps in and calms our amygdala's reaction down. What starts to happen is that the amygdala will have that intense response, but then from your meditation training, your prefrontal cortex kicks in, is able to say it's okay to your amygdala, calm down its response, and then you don't experience this overwhelming stress that's disproportionate to the event that you're dealing with. And this is where a lot of meditation's benefits come in. Of course, you're going to have lower stress if you're not overly reacting to things as much. Of course, you're going to be happier again if you're not reacting to things as much. But things like digestion and improved immunity also come from this exact kind of interaction between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The reason for this is because when we're stressed, and a good book to read that explains this in a lot of depth is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, is basically whenever we get stressed and whenever we get, really angry or have an intense emotional state, which again, by meditating, you kind of lower the amount of time that you spend in these extreme emotional states, we have a fight or flight kind of response kick in where our blood pressure goes up, our heart starts beating faster, our blood flow and all our energy goes away from digestion, and it's like our body is priming to fight something, or run away, as if it's still, in kind of ancient times where we were hunter-gatherers. It's kind of like it's still getting ready for a super dangerous situation emotion, even though there really isn't one. You're just really kind of disproportionately upset. And when this kind of reaction kicks in, it's really unhealthy for the body. Again, blood goes away from the stomach, so you're not able to digest food properly. You're having a high blood pressure for an extended amount of time. Your heart has to work extra hard. And also things like immunity and fighting off colds and flus, that's not as important when you're in, what your brain perceives to be, a life or death situation. And so because of this, when you're able to stop yourself from going to that extreme emotional state, you're able to, again, boost your immunity, boost your digestion, because your brain spends less time in this intense fight or flight response mode. And again, this fight or flight response mode is triggered by the most benign things for a lot of people who have lots of stress or anxiety and who don't meditate. So again, this is the main kind of biological way that meditation works, is you have an emotional reaction, and before it gets out of control, your prefrontal cortex is able to kind of calm down your amygdala, lower its activity, and then you're able to go about your day feeling much calmer and not have to deal with as much stress. Some studies have even shown that the amount of stress reduction you get from meditation actually has to do with how much your amygdala decreases in terms of its gray matter volume. There's one study that I'll go ahead and pop it up on the screen if I can find it. It basically showed that when people went through a mindfulness-based stress reduction program, the amount of kind of stress reduction that they found or got from doing that course was directly proportional with how much their amygdala shrunk in terms of their amygdala's gray matter volume. So we can, see a clear correlation between less stress and lower amygdala volume, which again, meditation has the capacity to provide for us. Not only does the amygdala activate less, but it actually becomes smaller. So it is not, doing as much. And so the next kind of aspect of meditation that is extremely important to understand if you want to, fully get a clear idea of why the benefits of meditation happen is the behavioral changes. So a lot of this is, governed by that same biology where you have the prefrontal cortex kind of inhibiting the amygdala and lowering our emotional responses to things. But the way that the behavioral changes kind of show up typically lead to the most significant changes that people will have in their lives. So again, first we'll start by looking at a non-meditator, what we typically do before we meditate, and then how meditation kind of affects us and how it changes our behavior for the better. So most people who don't meditate and who aren't very mindful or in the moment, they'll kind of just go about their day unconsciously. A lot of the things we do, a lot of the bad habits we have, a lot of the things that kind of drive us into the ground and keep us from being where we want to be in our lives have to do with unconscious habits. So while it kind of is, difficult to see your own unconscious habits, and it's, you might feel like I don't really have anything I unconsciously do that drives me into the ground or that's keeping me from where I'm going. You might kind of see it as oh, I have valid excuses for why I can't be where I want to be. And in some cases, this is definitely true, but there are lots of aspects of our life that we have a lot greater control over than we actually think we do. And if you kind of have a hard time believing that for yourself, think about some of your friends or your family members who have very, very obvious problems. To you, it makes complete sense why they can't get to their goals or why they keep doing the same mistakes over and over. You can clearly see that their behavior is the problem, and if they change their behavior, they'd be able to do much better. But for them, in their mind, they also feel the same way that you do. They feel like they don't really have any problems. They're not sure why they keep getting stuck in the same place. And while they might have a vague general idea of where to go to kind of help improve their life, they aren't very sure on the specific behavioral changes they need to bring about to see the things that they want to see. And so again, this is where kind of meditation comes in, is when you start meditating, you become more in the moment and mindful. And what this basically allows you to do is notice these unconscious behaviors that are holding you back. A good example of this is typically things like bad relationships or people who constantly are getting into and then getting out of bad relationships. This isn't to say that it's that person's fault for, people treating them badly. No one should be treating them badly. But one thing that they can do in their control is to be more selective with the people that they decide to engage with. But the problem is when you're that person, you don't realize when you are selecting someone that might not be good for you. There might be a lot of different reasons why this is happening, why you might be choosing partners that may not be suitable for you, whether it be your idea of love, past traumas, stuff like that. But when you start meditating, you'll notice, okay, why do I keep choosing the wrong people? Why do I keep making the wrong decisions? Why do I keep doing these things? And once you understand why, whether it has to do with kind of a flawed idea of something in your mind, it has to do with some emotional pain that you want to avoid, stuff like that. When you become conscious of these things, then you can actually work on on them. The problem is for most people, they have things that they want to do in life, they're unable to do them, and they know there's some obstacle in the way, but they're never really truly sure what that obstacle is. And that is kind of the crux of the problem when it comes to improving a lot of our lives, is we know where we want to go, and we know that we can't get there for a certain reason that's within our control. We don't know exactly what it is that's stopping us from getting there. So a good example from kind of my life has to do with healthy eating and exercising. So when I was kind of in high school, I would really rigidly and strictly follow lots of exercise regimes and healthy eating. I would eat insanely clean for about 8 months at a time. I would have barely any junk food. I would barely eat out, and I would be, just eating the best food I possibly could and working out super duper hard. However, every about 8 months or so, or 6 months or so, I would have a huge crash. I would completely stop working out for several months. I would binge eat all the time. I would have super unhealthy food. And the reason that this was happening was because I was being too rigid. I wasn't being, loose enough. I wasn't being relaxed enough. And if I fell off the wagon, that threw me off and really terrified me. But again, in that moment, when I was in that kind of headspace and I wasn't being mindful or present, I would just assume that the reason I keep falling off the wagon, the reason I keep messing up, is because I'm lazy, because I'm not meant to eat healthy, because I'm not meant to exercise. My body just doesn't want to. Stuff like that. And it led me to have, lots of self-criticism, lots of hatred, and things like that, when really the only problem was just my approach to eating healthy and my approach to exercise being way too rigid. And once I kind of, started becoming more mindful, became more aware of, how much stress my rigid rules for eating healthy and exercising were, I was able to loosen up, relax, and now I'm able to eat very consistently healthy and exercise as well without having that much stress added into my life. It's actually something I look forward to now. And so again, the same exact thing can happen to you. There might be some things that you just don't know why you can't get yourself to do them, but meditation will give you that awareness and will, help you catch yourself repeating the same exact mistakes over and over that keep you from getting to the places you want to go. And so to wrap up, I kind of want to give a couple of tips on starting meditation if this video has, piqued your interest in meditation. The biggest thing I'll say is just start really slow on a schedule that works really well for you. Even just 5 minutes a day of meditation is absolutely fantastic. Naturally let yourself get into meditation. Don't force it. If you don't really want to meditate, if it's not really that point in your life where you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. Do it when you feel comfortable doing it, when you have a natural interest in doing it, and start slow. Start at the exact pace you want to go. You don't have to worry about meditating 30, 40, or 50 minutes a day. It's okay to meditate for just 5 minutes a day. That's how I got my start. I meditated for 5 minutes a day, a couple times a week, and eventually slowly built up. And after about 4 years of meditating, I meditate 30 minutes a day very consistently. So again, to recap the whole video, the biological changes we see is that the prefrontal cortex is able to, kind of inhibit that amygdala response that we have and help us from experiencing extreme emotions, which leads to lower stress, greater happiness, better immunity, better digestion, and many other benefits that come from overall having less stress. And then in the behavioral changes, what meditation and mindfulness helps us do is notice the unconscious behaviors that are leading to problems in our life. And it helps us to stop ourselves from, repeating these unconscious behaviors over and over again, and helps us lead a happier and healthier life that's more in line with the direction that we want to go. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.